be deleted or overwritten. We said that last night. When you accidentally delete files off your hard drive, they're not gone. They're just erased from the table, so you can't pull that file readily. As long as it has not been written over, those files are still there. Just kind of hides them for a little bit. This includes the metadata, which is data about the data, and the residual data. Data can also be categorized in two different types: volatile and persistent data. Volatile data, like using volatility, we're going to go over that briefly tonight, is temporary data. It's saved in your RAM, your system memory. It's only there either during that session or while the computer is still alive and not turned off or rebooted. The data is lost when it shuts down or loses power. Digital forensics investigation needs to be quick, efficient, so that the RAM, it doesn't rewrite over it. If you don't have a lot of system memory, if I typically always look at either HTOP on a Linux machine or your system properties within a Windows machine, so you can constantly see how much RAM is being utilized. Some applications use more than others. Let's say Chrome is very picky, and it wants all of the RAM and resources it has, versus something like Firefox and even Edge uses less resources. So think of, if that's always being utilized, stuff's always getting rewritten over. So it's very crucial that we get that snapshot and that capture of what's on the system memory at that time, so we don't lose anything. So you need to be very efficient when it comes to information that's saved in that volatile state. Persistent data is the opposite. It's stuff that's written to the hard drive. It's not going to be erased, gone, unless it's been written over. It's very persistent on that machine. So preserve the evidence. It's very important you ensure the integrity of the data that you're working with. Document everything as you go along. Make sure you're making those notes, taking those screenshots, because everything that happens during this investigation, you need to be able to maybe not remember it, but be able to walk through it step by step, or somebody else can take that same investigation and be able to walk through it step by step, how this analyst got from point A to point B. And that's very imperative when it goes to a court of law, if it ever has to go that way. Chain of custody serves as that permanent record and a paper trail of how you got that piece of data from the owner to the analyst and all the steps in between. So make sure you have that good chain of custody. Just like I said, documents people, everyone that's come in contact with that evidence. And that's why those hash files are so important, because yes, I could hand this piece of evidence to John, he can pass it to Antonino, you know, it can go from point A to point B, but if that hash doesn't change, you can say the chain of custody was in a positive way, that nothing's changed. It's still the same exact piece of either piece of data, software, whatever, from point A to point B, through that whole chain of custody. This is why you should never work on the original copy. I said that last night, and we'll continue to drive that home. You take the original good copy, make a copy of it, and that's what you're going to be working with. Because when you run it through these applications, no, they're not supposed to read write to those applications, those files. But in the case of something happens, power goes out, whatever, you don't want that file to be corrupt. You want to have the original file still available that you can refer back to it. So best practice is to make an image or copy for your analysis. Kind of said this again. Okay. So we've got 2 labs to do tonight, and then we've got a overview, and then Tony's got some stuff for us. So what I want to do is we're going to break you out into your groups, and everything's written here, what you're going to do with that original image file that we had from last night. So you're going to go back into your Kali box, and you're going to launch autopsy again, and that's just by typing in sudo autopsy, or you can go into the start menu and you can go down to forensics and autopsy is also a link there in Cali. And what we're going to look at tonight is we're going to look at those deleted files within that image. Tony and I found 2 last night on our images. There possibly could be more, but you're going to take at least 30 to 45 minutes and run through this, do this integrity check. And if there's anything else on the computer you want to look at, go ahead, have fun at it. But we'll give you 45 minutes. We'll break you out into some groups. And yeah, when we get back, we'll go into some malware analysis. So we're going to dive deeper into that image file we had from last night. Are there any questions? All the instructions are right here. I walked through them last night, made sure that they were good. You should have no problems going through these. So there's no, the only mistype is you're not opening your SIFT workstation, you're opening your Kali box. If no questions, if you need us, you can jump into the staff room or hit us up by raising your hand, and we will jump into your breakout room. If not, have fun. The hashes. Yes, it should have come back as dirty in some way because that's a typical payload that would be created. So that just shows you that it doesn't matter if it has already run through a virus program or been caught yet. If it has those signatures like that reverse backdoor, it should pick up on VirusTotal, even though it's brand new. You have a brand new hash. Now that you uploaded it, your hash is now in the database of, hey, you know, this is a potential malicious payload. So it's successful. You guys made it. It went through. It was caught. Gives you a little peace of mind that when you are running something, it's a good way to test, you know, if something you found or something you created would ever be tagged and cursed as malicious in any way. So it was a good test. I did want to show, let's see, what do we have here? Share my Safari. So the last portion of this tonight, we've got 2 things to show you. One is I want to show you some volatility. That's another application we were working with. But before we go on that, just a quick little overview on email forensics. So if you ever click the email where you pop it up and you can click the from username, it drops down, like you could say like not spam at paypal.com, right? But you click it, and when it drops down, the from line says like Durka at Afghanistan.com, right? You're like, well, no, that's not PayPal. This is the same thing. So this is a log that was collected, and this is how you can do some of that forensics investigation on it. So we've talked about digital forensics on the computers, but email and mobile forensics also are an integral part of that forensics investigation. Email forensics, you're doing it every day when you're looking at those emails. You're doing a mental forensics. Is it spam? Is it possible phishing, whatnot? So email header is a main piece of evidence we're using for this analysis. So email came from antivirus1 at its.university.edu. And in quotes, you see the same thing. Here's an IP address. If we were to drop this IP address inside of domain tools, it should come back at university.edu by the same mail. But if you look right here, so their mail is at a different IP, that's fine. So these IDs right here, this is a specific ID, and we'll talk about down here in just a second, but this is that message ID that you may want to run through. These things can be captured within Splunk if you've got it feeding in there. But here's the message ID. Some of these message IDs may come up in a threat report that says like emails coming from antivirus1 at its.edu, antivirusuniversity.edu with this message ID are tagged to be malicious. Here's another one. Came from jupiter.cc.edu. So very similar IP address. It's 128.151. Here's your date time group. From some sender, same sender at mail.university.edu. So all this stuff right in here. So the above example is information found in the email header. The received field tracks the different mail servers. So this is all the different servers it had jumped through, when it jumped through them. This one at 54, and maybe a second later, So it was received by all these different mail servers. They handled or touched that message in any way. And when we're doing forensics, like you're thinking that that piece of mail went from this server to the next server to the next server. All those servers have the potential of being infected by it. So when you need to eradicate and remove this document off those servers, you have to jump back through those servers and clear it out as well. May not be something you're doing. Maybe the SOC team, maybe the incident response team is initiating clearing out that piece of malware. The date field is the time of the date the message was written in local time. So right here, the local time is on abbreviation, so it's Eastern Standard Time. The from field of the email is the author of the email. So here's your from. And the to field is who it's going to. Finally, you may also encounter the message ID in the email header. So that's what this is, ID with this. This is a globally unique identifier generated once the message is sent. So here it's sent here, and it looks like it's changed slightly. It's changed again slightly. Mobile forensics is a category within digital forensics that deals with the data retrieval and analysis from the mobile devices, such as tablets or smartphones. Now more than ever, people are reliant on their mobile devices, as you and I always are on our devices, to send and receive those very important messages. And we need those so we can investigate them if something was to happen. By conducting mobile forensics, investigators can analyze those phone records, text messages, search history, location data. We talked about that yesterday when we were looking at those images. They could possibly have some lat longs in the metadata and the EXIF data. The steps for mobile forensics includes seizure. That's usually in the law enforcement. After it's seized, the acquisition and analysis of going through that device and examining exactly what you have, usually on a computer, or they've got these mobile kits where you can just plug the phone into the side of this that looks like a really big tablet, and it will analyze everything right on that piece of equipment. It's like a field, I don't have the name of it off the top of my head, but piece of field gear that you can run through. That's kind of I think just reading this, besides the ID portion, I think the rest of it is pretty cut and dry the way it is. I want to show you volatility. Tony and I spent the last hour trying to figure it out. I say figure it out because it's not pre-installed on your workstation by default. So it's run from the Volatility Foundation. They have a GitHub page. I will copy and paste that into our Slack channel right now. And if you're into Git, you can go ahead and download it. Volatility 2 is the most stable one. Volatility 3 is the updated and beta one. But when it's actually installed, I'll show you this one as well. Let's see, that's my install. When you run volatility, it's very simple. It's command line based. You can get the Windows version, but what you're going to do is you run it right from the command line. So you start it with launching the application. So you're going to be in that folder when you copy the volatility GitLab or Git repository. You're going to go into that folder. You're going to run vol.py. You're going to signal that F is for the file name, and you're going to put your file name in there. Then you're going to select the profile. The profile is how volatility is going to read that image. What is it? What was it made on? This one was obviously made in Windows 7, Service Pack 0, and then your version 64-bit. After all that, so there's really three things here. Vol.py with F, you point it to the file. Great, piece of cake. Set the profile. And then after that, you've got the command. This command here, they call them plugins, is telling you what you want it to run. You want to run a PS list on that file. Just like if you were running in on your Linux or on your Windows computer, you just want to run a PS list or a PS tree, all the processes running, there it output the file. You can also do a little caret here and kick it out to a file so you can save it for later. Here's another example. Here's PS scan. You know, they ran that. What's another one here? You can run it to get your SIDs, security identifiers. Remember that from a couple weeks ago? So if you got the image, right, you can run it against that. Command scan, you can see all the different commands that were run from command.exe. See the history of it. So volatility is pretty easy. It's really easy to use. You run it right from the Python scripts. You point it to the file, then you point it to whatever plugin you want to use after you set the profile. By default, the profile comes back like Windows XP, and we figured out it's just not working that way, but you have to set the profile. Windows 7, Mac OS, whatever. I will also put this nice little web page in here so you can also look at it and run through it. This was better than me trying to pull it up and walk through it step by step with you guys. There's a bunch of examples in here. It really breaks it down for you. What was the next thing I want to show you? Yeah, so I was running volatility inside my SIFT workstation because I found a .dd file, and I ran vol.py under, it was in the qualify folder. But as I was trying to run other things, like looking at command line, there was no memory profile available. So I was just kicking it back. And then Tony and I were trying to figure out how to do a secure copy with a file from Kali to SIFT, and we ran out of time. But all right, I think y'all are wanting the answers to the rhino hunt, right? Yeah. Now everyone's excited. They don't care about volatility. They don't care about how to look at email messages. They're like, okay, you gave us a task yesterday. Now I want to know what was the answer. Did I pass go? Did I collect $200? Kick it over to you, to Mr. Tony.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And first, I do want to kind of touch upon what we were indicating before. So there are file signatures, right? And we see right here, they sometimes are referred to as magic bytes. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier when I was answering Henry, right? So we see right here, it says that our magic byte is nothing but the first few bytes of a file. This is to be able to indicate that this is a particular type of file. What format is it, right? And then there are a specific way that it ends as well to let us know that file is done. So there's a little bit of bits at the beginning and the end of every file, right? But it's the one at the very beginning that lets us know kind of what type of file we are working with. And as a matter of fact, if you recall, in Linux, there is a tool, right? That tool is the command just file. We learned about this when we were going ahead and going over our Linux commands near the very beginning of our boot camp, almost like 5 months ago now, right? So if you recall, we can be able to go ahead and we see that image right here where we say file, and we give it the name of a file, and it will tell us what kind of file this looks to be, right? So you'll see in this example of this image, it says file website.jpg, and it tells us that's a JPEG image data. Even gives us the it's following our standard 1.01, tells us the aspect ratio, density, and so on and so forth, right? So it's giving us information about what type of formatting is this file following, right? So we're going to see then, if we were to look at the actual hexadecimal values, this is the pattern that we should see at the very beginning of that file. This should be the ones and zeros, right? Converted over to hex that is being displayed by that file. That's what's indicating that we're dealing with a JPEG, right? So if a file doesn't have that, like was asked earlier, hey, what if we had some malware and all we do is just change the extension to .jpeg? Well, in that case, it still doesn't have this, right? It still doesn't have these magic bytes. And so therefore, when we evaluate it, when we look at it to see, hey, is this actually a JPEG? It's not going to come back, right? It's not going to say that that's an actual JPEG file. So that's kind of one thing we wanted to let you know, right? If you were a little bit more interested in that, there is this link right here, right? And I'll go ahead and I'll be posting this into our Slack channel for those that kind of want to look more into it. But there's a list of file signatures. So there's a lot of different file types that they're following this kind of procedure where the first few bits indicate what kind of file it is, right? And so if we want to kind of hide something, we have to do more than just change the extension, right? So keep that in mind. With that in mind, I am going to go ahead and I'm not going to go and give you guys straight the answer just yet. We will be posting that link to the walkthrough. The walkthrough that I have, I've created it for a previous class. It'll walk you through from the very beginning to the very end of this Rhino hunt, showing you how we can find every single image and answering all the questions, right? What I do want to do is introduce you guys to yet another tool. So you'll notice I'm inside of our SIFT, right? So we see the desktop back right there, right? SIFT workstation. So in the SIFT workstation, SIFT is very useful for forensics, right? Just like how Kali is good for penetration testing and being able to do a lot of these cybersecurity stuff when it comes to being red teaming, right? SIFT is very good for digital forensics and has a lot of digital forensics tools. So one of them we're going to see is known as PhotoRec, right? So let's see if we can go -H. So we see right here, PhotoRec is an actual data recovery utility, right? So this named after photo recovery, but it can actually recover more than just photos, right? This is particularly to be able to go into an area and see what can we recover, right? So this is building off of what we've been talking about with deletion of files, right? It's anytime we are deleting something, we are really deleting the reference to where that file is located. And unless, like Justin has mentioned, right, unless we go to that location in the actual hard drive or somewhere else and write over that information with new data, then the file is still there. It hasn't been deleted in reality. And so this data recovery utility is able to be able to go ahead and take a look at those areas and pull off that data for us, right? And you'll notice that it can work with our DD files, right? So if we have an image file of a partition or a hard drive or something similar, we're able to run it through this utility and it can be able to go ahead and recover a bunch of images or files or text files, whatever the case is that were deleted, right? So how can we use this? Well, you'll see it tells us the usage is to start with the command photorec, right? And then we can give it the file that we want to be able to use or the device, right? So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say photorec. You'll notice that if I take a quick look, I've already downloaded the Rhino Hunt stuff, right? And I have my Rhino Hunt image right here. And then of course we have our 3 logs. If you recall, we said that the logs are wire traffic, right, from the network. And so we can be able to use Wireshark to be able to look at those. So you should be able to find about 4 or 5 images right off the bat from just looking through these 3 log files, right? Opening them up in Wireshark one by one and trying to be able to go ahead and look for those images. And then we're going to see right here, our Rhino USB, we can actually be able to go ahead and use PhotoRec for this. Now, the reason I'm going to show you PhotoRec is because 1, it's a nice little tool, right? And just like Justin was saying with volatility, we want to kind of be aware of these tools, right? And kind of just know how they can be used. So that's one reason. The other is I did point out that when it comes to our autopsy, no matter what version of autopsy you're using, they pretty much run the same, right? But the version that's kind of freely installed here on SIFT and over here in our Kali machine, this is an older version, right? If we go back and we take a look at it, let's see, if I click help here, well, I might have it to, I need to go back and run that service to be able to go ahead and have autopsy up and running again. But if we were to go and take a look, I believe what ends up happening is it's a older version of like 2 point something, when the newer version, I think it's like 4.8 or something like that. So it's in the 4s already. So the newer version is able to do a lot more stuff. It's more capable than the older version of autopsy. So if we were running a newer version of autopsy, we may not have to run PhotoRec, right? To be able to recover some of the files we're going to see in a little bit. And it runs very similar to what you were already looking at when you were using autopsy in Kali and in SIFT, right? So that's why we were having you guys use that. It's freely available with these, and it is similar to use whether it's the older version or the newer version. But to be able to recover these files here, we're going to see that PhotoRec is going to be easier to be able to go ahead and pull off some of these because it's able to actually view some of those deleted files that our older version of autopsy isn't able to display. So I'm just going to type in PhotoRec like our usage dictates, right? And then we're going to go ahead and give it that DD image file. So that's our Rhino USB.dd, right? So I just go ahead and give it that file name. And you'll notice it enters into this kind of a menu screen, right? So now it's running our utility. So you'll see right here, it's saying that it's PhotoRec 7.1. It's letting us know that this is a data recovery utility, right? So it is already by default installed on SIFT. We don't have to do anything for that. This is free software, right? Comes absolutely with no warranty. So we're kind of using this at our own discretion to try and recover stuff, right? That's another reason why, as Justin has pointed out, we're going to want to be able to go ahead and kind of work on a copy of an image, right? Not necessarily the actual original itself, right? That way, in case something happens, in case something gets messed up, we're not messing up the original. We're keeping that pure, right? And so then what here is telling us to select a media. So what is it that we're trying to use this utility on? And so you'll see we only have at the moment one selection. That's the file we fed it, right? Rhino USB.dd. And then it gives us a little bit of information about the size, right? So how many bytes is this? Now down here, we can proceed, right? We could run this in sudo, or we could exit out of the utility. And how are we going to use that? The left and right arrows will go ahead and allow us to do that at any time, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit proceed. Now here, we see that we have two things we can do, right? It tells us it found a FAT16, so that's an older kind of version of how we're able to put stuff on the hard drive, right? FAT16 is pretty old at this point. Then they moved to FAT32, and then Windows moved to NTFS, right? So we see right here, they found one using FAT16, and then they tell us a little bit of information, right? Where does the starting sector begin? Where does the end sector begin? What's the size and sectors and so on and so forth. So we could scan just that partition, or whenever we have options like this, we could use the up and down arrows, right? So I can scan just the partition that it found, or I could scan the whole disk. You'll notice it mentions that this is the whole disk right here on the right side. So here, I want to try and grab as much as possible. So rather than scanning just the partition, I want to scan the whole disk. And so now I'll hit enter, because then it's going to see that we have our options on here. I want to search that section, right? So I'm going to hit enter to search. Again, if I use the right or left arrows, I could go to options, I can go to file opt, or I could quit out if I want to, but I'm going to keep it on search. I'm going to make sure that I have whole disk selected. I'm going to hit enter. And then right here, it's going to tell us what type of things are we looking for, and what file system in particular are we expecting, right? So we'll notice right here, it says on other, they were using a FAT type, right? So that has to be FAT16 or FAT32, or maybe an NTFS file system, or so on and so forth, right? Now, if it was one of these X file systems, we'd want to go with the first top option, right? So I want to keep it on other, because we already know it has a partition of FAT16, and I'll just hit enter. And then now it's telling us, where do we want to save the files that we're going to be pulling? So all the stuff we're going to be recovering, all the stuff it's going to find, where do we want to put it? And notice it says, instead of hitting enter, we need to hit the letter C, right? When we select the correct destination, press C. If we want to quit, hit Q. And we're going to use our arrow keys to move up and down to make that selection, right? So if you recall, This zip file, that's where we downloaded the files originally, right? Rhino USB, that's the actual file we're trying to be able to scan from. This was created the moment I used photo rec to be able to go ahead and start pulling this. And then here's our log files. I don't want to be able to put it in any of those. If we go with the dot, again, that's our Linux sort of formatting, right? And if we recall, dot means go up one level, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and actually select the single dot. That means the current directory. So all the files that I'm going to be pulling, I'm going to just store them into the current directory. That's what that's going to do. And then again, if I hit enter, it's not going to do anything because it's telling us the moment we have our current directory or whatever directory we want to use selected, and it's the correct directory, we hit C. So I'm going to hit C. And now it moves here where it's going to run through everything and try and pull off as much as it can. Once it's done, we're going to see that it says recovery completed. So it pulled off 134 different files. You'll notice inside of the directory, it created this recoup directory, right? So I was able to recuperate all of these 134 files, created the special directory inside our current directory. That's where we're going to go ahead and find them. And then it tells us, hey, you are welcome to donate and support and encourage further development. So if you want to support them, you may do so. But at this point, we know that it was able to pull off everything that it could. So you'll notice down at the bottom, it says quit. So I'm going to hit enter. Now it returns back to our selection of what we want to scan. I'm just going to hit the right arrow until we go back to quit, hit enter. Here, again, what media do we want to select? I'm going to go over to quit, hit enter. And once we're back to our regular terminal, we're done using that utility. Now, if I want, I can go ahead and open up our file explorer. I can go to that directory. I was having it inside of our downloads. Here's that recoup directory that we just created. And if we open it up, there's all 134 files that I was able to pull out. So you'll already notice there are, in fact, some Rhino photos here. So that's part of what we were looking for, right? It's not everything we were looking for, but there's part of that. Another thing we're going to see here is this doc folder, right? So this ends in .doc. This is a Word folder or file, and we're going to want to open it up and take a look at it. And if we open this up, we're going to see that there's a lot of information here because this looks to be like this is a type of diary, right? So it has some information. It's telling us that this happened in August of 2001. We see the next entry and so on and so forth. But if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, the last entry, we start seeing some stuff, right? Some stuff specifically that deals with our search for Rhino pictures, right? And here they even admit that, hey, they hid some photos, right? Why? Because apparently if we have less than 10, it's no big deal, right? That was part of this scenario. If we have a certain amount and it's less than a certain number, then it's not illegal. It's only illegal once they have above a certain amount, right? So they hid some photos in certain locations. So what can we do with that, right? And then we also see this entry right here, for example. It says, okay, things are getting a little weird. I zapped the hard drive, threw it into the Mississippi River. That's already a clue to one of our answers, right? I'm going to reformat my USB key after this entry. Again, that's dealing with another one of our questions, one of the answers we're looking for, right? But he says he's going to try not to destroy the good stuff, right? And then it says I need to change the password on the GNOME account that Jeremy gave me. So now we know that he got a password for a certain account. And again, we can find that information in those Wireshark transfers. We know who gave it to him. Jeremy gave it to him, right? And then we also find out where he could probably be able to do this stuff, right? Of being able to go ahead and wipe the USB key, but not destroy the good stuff by going to Radio Shack, right? So by doing this, we're able to answer some of those key questions that we needed to be able to look for, right? And we're able to find some of those Rhino pictures. But the object is to try and find about 9 or more of those, right? And so far, if we go ahead and go back, so let's go ahead and close this. We see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So right off the bat, we found 4 this way, recovering it from the USB drive, right? Now, part of what we're looking for is when we go back to those Wireshark transfers, how can we connect what was happening across the network to what we found on this USB drive, right? So that's part of it as well, is how can we be able to say that, yeah, we found these images, but 4 isn't illegal. And so how do we know that the rest of them that we're going to be finding on that Wireshark transfer are connected to the individual that have this? And so therefore we can count those images we find there in the count total of the 9 that we're looking for, right? Now, in addition to that, one thing we're going to take a look at, and my walkthrough will have as well, is that some of these images right here aren't what they appear, right? If we go back, as a matter of fact, let me see if I can be able to go ahead and pull it up. If we go back to our learning module, so let me go ahead and let's take a look at that. One of the things that we mentioned when it comes to forensics is the concept of being able to hide stuff in plain sight, right? So let's see, if I go here and we go back to our digital forensics. So I believe here we did go ahead and mention, let's see, let me just go ahead and do this. There we go. Steganography, right? Steganography, Justin went over it beautifully when we discussed this, right? The process of hiding messages and files inside of another file. So if we come back here and we look at these images, if we look up a steganography tool, we'll actually be able to go ahead and open these up and be able to go ahead and find that there are actually more rhino pictures hidden inside of these alligator pictures. So if you go through what we're able to recover here, if you go through the Wireshark files, right, we'll be able to go ahead and recover about 7 to 8 photos of rhinos. And then I believe the last 2 are actually hidden in some of these alligator photos. So to be able to find all 10 of them, you'll have to be able to go ahead and see how we can be able to pull out of that steganography tool those last 2 images, right? So let's actually go ahead. We've seen how we can be able to go ahead and use the recovery tool. And again, if we have the newer version of Autopsy, when we go ahead and do what we did earlier today, right? Earlier today, we saw how we can be able to use Autopsy to look for deleted files. So the newer version of Autopsy will be powerful enough to be able to do what this just did, right? It'll be able to go ahead and show us these text files. It'll be able to show us that Word document. It'll be able to show us these images, and we'll be able to see that in the latest version of Autopsy as well. But again, it's good to know the different tools that are available to us so that we can be able to have more things to be able to use when we need it, right? But let's go ahead and take a look at Wireshark. So I believe if we go ahead and look for that, so here's Wireshark. Let's go ahead and start that up. And then if we go ahead and open up, and I'm going to go ahead and go to our downloads, and let's go ahead and take a look at that first log, for example. So here is that first log. Again, all 3 of the logs can be opened up in Wireshark to show our network transfer stuff, right? One thing that we can do to be able to take a look at what images or what objects there might be. Now, it's not going to show us all of them 100% of the time, right? It's only going to be the ones that Wireshark can easily be able to identify and be able to pull for us automatically, right? So there are going to be some times where we might still have to manually go into a packet and be able to pull off an image file or something similar, right? So here I can go to File and Export Objects. And then what type of protocol was being used? So how were our devices communicating when they were transferring over that object, right? So a good place to look a lot of the time is HTTP, right? Did somebody do some web browsing and then get some images that way, right? Whether it was like through their email clients or just going to a website, whatever the case was, right? So HTTP, if I click there, we're going to see it's going to show us all the different types of objects that HTTP downloaded, right? So here's the content type, the host name from where it came, what packet number, if we were to go through all the different packets back here in our traffic, right? Does it show that object coming in on? What's the size? But more importantly, we can see the file name, right? And we can filter this out if we want to, right? So I can be able to go ahead and search for something like Rhino, for example, and see if that comes up with something. Or on our file name here, we can be able to go ahead and just kind of scroll down and see if we're able to find anything that kind of comes up with that, right? Now, sometimes we can be able to find something, sometimes we cannot, right? So it doesn't seem like there's really something there in that HTTP, but again, that's just one of the different areas we can look in, right? We also have our Samba server. We also have IMF, we have TFTP, and so on and so forth, right? Now, you'll notice that some of these, when we go ahead and click on it, they're still going to be empty, right? So it doesn't seem like anybody was using TFTP and so on and so forth, right? If we go ahead and go to our Samba server, we're not going to see that. But for example, let me go ahead and open up, I think it's Rhino 2. And if we go here, we'll see that here we're able to quickly and easily find rhino4.jpg and rhino5.gif, right? So sometimes we'll be able to easily be able to find some of the stuff that we're looking for, or find something that seems suspicious, right? And we can be able to then pull that out. Now, how would I be able to go ahead and pull this out from that network traffic? You'll notice down at the bottom, I can either save all of these objects, right? Or I could be able to highlight one and save that particular one. So let's say I want to be able to pull this rhino5.gif. I could highlight it, click save, and then here it's going to tell me where do I want to save it, right? Let's say I want to save it into my documents folder. And then up at the top right, it says save. So I'll click save. Now that should be that we've been able to save that particular object into the folder that I told it to, right? So if I were to go back to my files explorer here, and let's go to my documents, there is Rhino5. And we'll notice that this Rhino image is different from the 4 that I saw here that we're able to pull off the USB drive. So already we found 5 of the 10 images. That's already half of them, right? So that's as far as I'm going to go right now. I do want you guys to be able to go ahead and play around with this a little bit more. Use PhotoRec, try and see how much you can be able to answer those questions. Try going through those Wireshark logs if you haven't already. Try and be able to pull off the rest of them. And then once you've gone as far as you can, then go ahead and take a look at the walkthrough that I'll be providing. So I will be posting that as soon as class is done, right? So once our class for tonight is finished, I'll be posting that link along with the website for the Magic Bytes so that you guys are able to have that information. And then once you guys get as far as you can with the Rhino Hunter, you're able to go ahead and get as many of the images and answer as many of the questions as you possibly can. Then go ahead and take a look at that walkthrough. It is about 51, almost an hour long. So it's 51 minutes. But again, it takes you from the very beginning to going ahead and unzipping our files all the way to getting to all 10 images of our Rhino images that we're looking for and answering all the questions there. With that in mind, are there any questions, comments, concerns whatsoever with what we've shown so far for the Rhino hunts? All right. In that case, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Justin so we can be able to go ahead and wrap it up for the evening.
No, Tony, thanks for showing us. It was pretty interesting. So
you're welcome.
Alrighty, well, that's awesome. Now we got some more exposure to Wireshark. I don't know if you guys did in the beginning of class. I wasn't with you at that point, but there's a lot inside Wireshark that you can get a lot of forensic information at. You can do a lot of hunting to see what's actually going on, because sometimes you may think you know what's going on, but there's a lot of traffic going back and forth, and being able to capture something passively because it's not live, capturing a file or a log file after the fact, but being able to pull out those images, being able to pull out, piece of information, even Word documents, even emails out of a packet capture, like is just amazing. I made some notes here for more volatility stuff. I think I gave you enough that you can run with, get a little exposure to it, just like these couple of tools we had here. PhotoRec's another great tool, EXIF tool. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff you can throw in your basket, and I'm hoping that you can either make a little folder on your desktop or make a bunch of links to like a forensics toolkit that no matter where you go, you can say, okay, I'm on this new distro on Linux. I'm going to build my own forensic toolkit, right? That will help you. And a lot of stuff, like me, I play with it once or twice. I go and do something else 6 months, a year down the road. I'm like, oh, I remember using that. How do I use it again? Use the TAC H when you launch the file. Like vol.py, TAC H, it'll give you all the help. Just like we did with Autopsy, and we just did with PhotoRec. That TAC H, that help function, look at the manual, read the manual, and it will tell you how to use that program. But I hope you all had fun tonight. I hope it was good and entertaining, and you got to play around with some cool tools. Not everything's available in Kali, like you can see. There's a lot of stuff in GitLab. A lot of very, very smart people that build stuff to make our lives a lot easier. They mainly do it for themselves, but then they share it with everybody else. So that's the main thing. But Tony and I will hang around for a little bit longer if you have any questions. We're still grading some red team exercises. So if you've had them done, just give them some time, but they should be done within a week after they're submitted.
If you haven't turned it in, just in case there's anybody out there that's still trying to be able to get it completed and turned in, turn it in ASAP, because Justin and I will be finishing up grading them this weekend. And so we want to be able to have everybody completed, right? So if you haven't turned it in, turn it in as soon as possible. For those of you that have turned it in and maybe wondering, where's my grade? I haven't gotten a response yet. By Monday, we'll have it completed and you should be able to see those feedback coming back to you. So on Monday, when we meet up for class, if you haven't seen it then, definitely let us know, but you should be able to have your feedback and your grades posted by then.
And let's see, so next week we're going to start on the NIST framework. So identifying NIST is going to be on Monday. So if you can, go and read ahead a little bit. Play around with these tools this weekend because you will need them for your final project. But go ahead and do some read aheads because NIST is very big. And the more you can read ahead now, maybe it can spin up some questions that we can answer next week. So have a great weekend. If you need us, go to hit us up on Slack. I should have some hours, I believe Saturday morning, maybe Sunday morning as well. But just hit me up in Slack and I will I'll tell you what's available for me.
And also keep an eye out on the Slack channel where you're going to be posting that feedback for tonight's session. So when that link is posted, please go ahead and take some time to be able to go ahead and give us that feedback. That way we can be able to go ahead and know how you guys feel about the session. And if we need to make any course corrections, we're able to do so. Other than that, as Justin said, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. That way we can be able to go ahead and answer any questions or deal with any concerns you may have. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you guys on Monday.
Hey, Tony, do you know when is the last day for the course?
Say that again.
Oh, do you know
September
when is the
28th.
last? Oh, September 28th. Oh, okay.
Correct. So
All right, got it.
I believe that's a Thursday, and that'll be our graduation ceremony for you guys, I believe.
Cool. So what is the requirement to get a certificate? Say, you know, we complete the course.
So I believe you're supposed to have completed 2 of the career simulations at the very least. There's a certain attendance requirement as well. You have to have been here a certain amount of the times that we had open for the days, right? And then, of course, I believe we're going to be towards the last weeks of the boot camp, having you guys work on a project that'll go ahead and kind of display the knowledge and the skills that you've gained throughout the boot camp. And so completing that project would also be a part of that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, for those of you that are still here, if you have any questions, feel free to be able to go ahead and either unmute yourself or type it into the chat. Otherwise, if there are no further questions, then like we said, have a wonderful weekend and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Thank you so much, Tony and Justin. Yes, it was an amazing session. Thank you all for your participation. The survey link is in the chat box. Make sure you give your valuable feedbacks and read tonight's session. Have a great weekend and see you on Monday.
All right, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. I'll see you guys on Monday.
Sounds good.
See you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Kumar. I'm the Kumar Manager for Cybersecurity. I hope you guys have had an amazing weekend and wonderful day so far. Before we get ahead with the session, please give me a quick confirmation if my voice is loud and clear. You can confirm in the chat box too. Hello, Ryan. Is it better now? Great. Today we are going to start with a new and last course of cybersecurity, that is Defensive Blue Team. Um, I hope that this course is unlocked. If not, reach out to me on Slack or send me a direct message here in Zoom. And we'll just wait for 5 more minutes because I don't see any trainers have joined so far. So please do wait for 5 minutes and we'll get started with the session. Thank you.
All right. So it is now 5:34. We have about 16 people signed in. So we're going to go ahead and begin. And hopefully most everyone that is having issues, if there's anybody that's having issues with signing in, that they'll be here soon. Of course, as always, if you're able to, go ahead and turn on your cameras. Make sure you guys are safe. If you're driving, make sure you go ahead and get to your destination first before turning on your camera. And then, of course, you'll probably want to be able to go ahead and make sure that you're going to your blue team sections and turn on your virtual machines so that we guys can be able to be ready with that if and when we need to be able to go ahead and use them, right? So we're going to go ahead and see that we're kind of shifting away from what we were doing the past month, so to speak. The last month we've been doing red team. We've been learning how to be able to go ahead and how we can be able to gain access, right? Unauthorized access to a machine or a device. Now we're going to go ahead and kind of see how we can be able to go ahead and defend against something like that, right? So with blue team, it's all about defense. I like to be able to go ahead and put it in two different analogies, right? When it came to red team, we were kind of like that, almost like a super spy, right? A spy is always about trying to get into an area, be able to recover some information, and then getting out, right? That's exactly what we were doing as red team. We were trying to get into an area, whether we had authorized access or not, right? Get some sensitive information and get out. So we were being like a spy. But now that we're on blue team, being blue team is more like a detective, right? We're going to be looking at the crime scene. We're going to be trying to be able to gather the evidence that we can, and then looking at the evidence to see what does it tell us? What is the story? What is the pieces putting, when we put them together, what are they letting us know about what happened, right? So we're playing more the role of a detective in this case, and we're trying to be able to figure out what happened, then how can we prevent something like this from happening again in the future, right? So that's typically what's going on. So let me go ahead, let me share my screen, and let's go ahead and take a look at how we can be able to go ahead and get into blue team. All right, so hopefully everybody's able to see my screen here. And so we're going to see then, of course, we want to go into our blue team section, right? So we're in defense, blue team. Clicking on self-learning, we're going to go ahead and start with 1.2 SOC analyst, right? So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the very beginnings of what we're going to be doing for our blue team. So let's go ahead and minimize that. And we're going to see right here that our introduction tells us that a lot of the time when someone says, oh, I work in cyber, as in cybersecurity, right? Well, we all have different ways of interpreting exactly what we picture when we're thinking about cyber, when we're thinking about cybersecurity, or just something to that effect in general, right? So here we say it could be anything from being a help desk to being something where if we're working in cyber, maybe it's dealing with something digital. So we're picturing more like programming something like rockets, right? To be able to go ahead and do something like with NASA or JPL or even SpaceX, right? Where they're getting stuff to be able to go to Mars. So we say that cyber has grown exponentially as a field. In the past decade, it's starting to encompass a wide range of different careers. But what most people still think about, right, are people working behind the scenes to, what it is usually is behind the scenes, that we're mitigating issues, we're working on things that most people may not even be aware of, right? A good analogy with this is kind of the Air Force, right? A lot of the times you picture the Air Force, or if somebody says, I want to be in the Air Force, what are they picturing? They're picturing something like Top Gun, right? Where they get to be able to go and fly the planes. That's what they're thinking about. A lot of the times, Air Force, being a pilot. But if you've ever been in the Air Force, or if you know somebody that's been in the Air Force, what is it that the majority of the people that are part of the Air Force actually doing? They're not pilots. They're not flying the planes, right? It's more maintenance, making sure that the planes are ready to go and do their thing when they need to be, right? That's kind of what's happening here with cyber as well, right? We're not doing all these big and fancy things a lot of the time. Most people that are working in cyber, we're working on things behind the scenes with stuff that happens day to day that most people may not even be aware of, right? Trying to be able to make sure that things are still going to continue working the way they should, right? So we say then today, we're going to explore one of the more exciting roles that we can be able to do in our cybersecurity field, and this is being a SOC analyst. So becoming a SOC analyst, you see, can open up the doors to many different other fields in cybersecurity. This role gives you the knowledge and the skills to manage information systems that can help you go down many different paths, such as digital forensics examiner, or even to something like digital director, right? So starting here can lead to very big other positions. So here, for our stuff, as we're taking this first step, right, we're going to pretend that we're an employee of the CIA. In this case, that's going to stand for Cyber Integrity Association. Now, this company is tasked to conduct real-time monitoring over its owned networks, right? So somebody owns these networks. We're getting permission to be able to go ahead and monitor these. And so we want to be able to go ahead, since we have the permission, we have the ownership, right, so to speak, we're able to go ahead and work on these. So you are made aware that several employees have been receiving strangely worded emails from your bank, right? And we put that in double quotes, banking of the nation. You are then alerted by one of the employees that they had downloaded the attached file in that email to reactivate their bank account. And then now you are tasked with parsing through the network to see if malicious actors were able to infect the company's computers, right? So that's kind of one type of thing that might happen as you're being a SOC analyst, right? Having to go ahead and kind of deal with these phishing attacks, so to speak, right? So we're seeing right here our learning objectives. We're going to be able to see what are the day-to-day tasks and responsibilities that a SOC analyst might have. We're going to be able to then explain what is the SOC analyst role in business continuity planning and for continuing operations. We're going to identify the way that organizations can ensure that they can prevent and overcome serious incidents or disasters quickly and then go back to normal operations. And then we're going to explore the structures that are in place at the organizations to comply with rules and regulations, right? Because a lot of the time, a lot of the information that this company or an organization might have, it needs to be kept within compliance of certain laws that may have been passed, or maybe just rules and regulations of the company itself, right? For example, if this company were a company dealing with medical stuff, then we might be subject to HIPAA rules, right? Where each patient's secret information needs to be kept secret. It can't be accessible to somebody else, right? Otherwise, that's a HIPAA violation, right? So that's what's kind of going on here. So we're going to see then activity 1A. Here's where we're going to be beginning to learn the rules of our SOC analyst, right? So we see right here, as we saw with that scenario, right? We're working at this company, right? Our Cyber Integrity Association. And this phishing campaign just happened and somebody opened up that email and downloaded the attachment, right? So now we're going to get a little bit more into it. So we say right here, what do we notice if we look at this email? What can we look at and be able to determine is off? What's letting us know that this probably is not a legitimate email, right? So it says, let's discuss what we think we should and should not find in an email if it were really coming from a bank, such as this fictional bank we have, Banking of the Nation, right? Now, at a quick observation, after we look at this email, would you download the file, right? Now, obviously, for those of us that know a little bit of our cybersecurity stuff, right, that we've been doing this boot camp for a while and just are skeptical by nature, right, we would usually be quick to say no. If you have something that might look suspicious or you're not sure if you can trust it, don't download any of the external files, right? Don't have anything that's attached to it. Don't look at it. Don't download it or anything like that, right? But we ask ourselves, what about those who are not so tech savvy, right? Because that's where a lot of this stuff happens, right? You don't need everyone to be able to be gullible enough to be able to download this stuff in order to be able to infect a company, right? You only need one person to be able to go ahead and do that and then give you access to the machine, right? And then now that you have that, you have your foothold. And as we saw in Red Team, once you get a foothold in one machine, there's ways that we can be able to laterally move from one machine to another, or we could be able to go ahead and privilege escalate into higher accounts of authority, which then may allow us to be able to go ahead and switch to other things, right? Or just make it worse for what we're doing, right? So we then point out, well, what about folks who are observing too quickly and following the given direction? So they look at this email and maybe they are tech savvy, but at first glance, the email kind of looks legitimate. And so they're rushing to be able to go ahead and do what the email says, right? What's going to happen there? And so we say actors. So this is our malicious actors, right? The people that are trying to be able to get into our company's system. These type of actors depend on those two scenarios to play out so their attacks can be implemented, right? Somebody that's, because that sense of urgency, as Justin has discussed with us before, right? Because of that sense of urgency, they're going to want to be able to go ahead and do what the email is saying because, oh my God, if I don't do this right now, something bad is going to happen, right? Or that they're not tech savvy. And so they don't realize that, hey, even if this looks suspicious, even if I'm not sure about this, I'm still going to download this and take a look at it, right? When they shouldn't be. So we point out a lot of the times, right, we can be able to have these phishing attacks. They can appear to be very convincing, which is why proper training and vigilance is key, right? Now, what do you notice about this email that would make you think that it may not be legitimate? And then are there any links or attachments to click on, or are there any attempts to solicit information? These are all going to be things to thinking about when looking through these emails, right? So we see this right here. If we look at this image, what are some things that we might be able to point out that are not, or in other words, are more likely to be the ways of being able to identify that it's not legitimate, right? Once you picture something or once you have an idea of what's something that might not be legitimate, go ahead. You can either type it in the chat or unmute your mic and say it out loud.
Typos.
Excellent. So yeah, there's a few typos here, right? One that was pointed out by Griffith. It says, dear valued customer instead of valued, right? I like how John also points out in the chat. If we look at the bank address, right, the name supposedly says Banking of the Nation, but then next to it, it shows what the actual email is, and it's at gmail.com, right? So John points out no legitimate bank is going to be working with an email address at gmail.com, right? They would have paid enough to be able to have their own domain. So it would have been something more like at bankofthenation.com or something similar, right? So it shouldn't be Gmail. That's going to be something that's going to be throwing it off and making it seem like, hey, that's probably not legitimate, right? John also points out their graphic design is pretty awful. Well, we haven't seen the graphics used by the actual bank itself. So maybe the actual bank actually has some awful graphics as well, right? But yeah, it could be that, hey, if we look at the way that the graphics are being used by the company and then the graphics in this email, maybe there is something off about them, right? And so then the graphic design could be a way to be able to tell whether or not it's legitimate. Let's see. Cameron, I believe, pointed out another typo as well, right? Let's see. John says, also, is the mouse over showing a link to YouTube. So yeah, if you look down at the very bottom, it looks like there's a YouTube link that's happening down there, right? What else might be something? Excellent. Antonino points out, currently banks don't notify via email. So that right there could be a thing, right? A lot of the times, depending on what the organization is, a lot of the big organizations that you might be scared of, like, oh my God, I got something from this, I need to respond to it, like your bank, or maybe something like from the federal government, like maybe the IRS, right? A lot of times you might see something that coming from the IRS supposedly saying like, hey, you owe the IRS money. If you don't do this, we're going to start holding your wages, right? So send us this money because you're back in taxes or something like that. Well, as Antonino pointed out, a lot of the times when it's something that serious, they're going to communicate in paper, right? They'll send you actual mail. They're not going to just send you a voice call or voicemail, right? Or an email or something like that. So that's something that will also be suspicious. If you're getting an email that's talking about this particular subject, something that's serious, and you're getting it via digital communication instead of paper communication, that's suspicious, right? Let's see, John says in the chat, if you really wanted to check on your bank issue, you could reach out to your bank independently to verify. Yes, that is correct, right? That's a lot of the things that I like to do. If you get an email or something and it kind of seems suspicious or it's talking about a certain thing, individually, separately, go ahead and contact that organization or your bank or whatever it is, right? And be like, hey, I was just notified about this. Is this legitimate? Is this an actual thing, right? All right, Anusha's making sure that everyone is able to go ahead and see and hear everything correctly right now. So if you guys are experiencing any Zoom issues, please go ahead and contact her and let her know. If not, wonderful. At least hopefully we're improving from that so you guys aren't experiencing those issues, right? All right, what's one more thing? There's at least one more thing that we can be able to go ahead and point out that is going to show that this seems to be very suspicious. Excellent. Henry has some good advice. He says, if there are any phone numbers, like a toll-free number listed in the email itself, if that email is suspicious, don't call or contact them with the information that's in the email. Verify separately what your actual bank information or whatever the organization is, what number to contact them is, or what the contact information is, and then contact them through that, right? So verify it separately from the suspicious email. All right, if we recall what Justin told us about when we were talking about how we could try to be able to go ahead and exploit a system, right? We were going over MSF Venom at the time. He pointed out that one of the key things that we want to do is create a sense of urgency, right? What is creating that sense of urgency here in this email?
The phrase that says if no action is performed within 24 hours, your account and all funds will be closed.
Excellent. Yes. So with that phrase, that's what's really going to get a hold of most people that don't know what's happening, right? As Antonino also put in the chat, that means your moolah, your cash, is apparently supposedly going to be gone if you don't do something within 24 hours, right? Now, would a legitimate bank just take your money and close everything out within 24 hours if you weren't to reset your password? Probably not, right? A legitimate bank is probably not going to do something like that within 24 hours, just with an email notification. So that right there, that sense of urgency, that's something, again, hey, I noticed this. They're doing something that kind of seems iffy for a bank to be doing within just 24 hours of just emailing me about this. Because what if I hadn't seen my email within those 24 hours? Now suddenly all my funds are gone, right? That's very suspicious. That should be making us double think about what's happening here. So excellent. And then Cameron also pointed out in the chat, if we look at next to the top right there where it says banking of the nation, that little circular icon image, right? That profile image, it's going with the basic default profile image, right? So he says, I'm pretty sure banks don't just leave their default profile image with the default logo, right? They would have an actual logo of the bank or something similar that you'll probably be seeing when they contact you. And that's very legitimate as well, right? A good thing to be able to point out. All right, so we've seen all these things that kind of point out and let us know that, hey, this seems very, very suspicious. And so you and I, as we're becoming cybersecurity experts, right, we're able to identify these things, we're able to know these things. But again, remember, these malicious actors are relying on the fact that not everybody's going to know this, right? There's going to be a handful of people in every organization that's going to fall for something like this. They're going to see it, and their first thing is going to be like, oh my God, I got to respond to this. Or they're going to see it, and they're not going to know any better, right? They're not going to know that it looks suspicious. So we get down right here to our SOC analyst duties. So we see our SOC analyst has to perform real-time log analysis. Now, if you recall, way back when, right, we took a quick look at some logs, and now we're really going to start getting into it here as part of Blue Team, right? Because when we're looking at logs, we're going to see all these different events that have been happening on our system, and we're going to have to try and piece together what exactly is going on, right? So we have to perform real-time log analysis. We have to look through these things, look at these events, see what's happening, right, in order to provide network and data security to our clients. Now, some of the beginning processes and common attack vectors that SOC analysts may see on any given day include the following three things, right? We might see a threat or vulnerability analysis, and we saw that when we were doing Red Team, right? How we could be able to go ahead and do this. This might be something as simple as running an mmap scan, right? Or something like a Nessus scan or something similar, right? Trying to be able to go ahead and see, hey, if I have access to this system, what things is it running that might be vulnerable, right? Where might it be weak, so that way we can then be able to act upon it or do something, right? Number two, investigating or documenting issues, right? So here, this would be that we notice something's going wrong, or something doesn't seem to be happening quite right, or just that as we're looking through logs, we look at something that doesn't seem to be normal. The key word a colleague of mine used previously that I'd love to be able to go ahead and use moving forward is anomaly, right? If we're looking at logs and something seems weird, if we see an anomaly, something that's different, something that's not normal, right, to how things normally are, we probably want to take a closer look at it, right? Because that might be an indicator that malicious actors have gotten in and are starting to do something weird, right? And now it could be that when we take a closer look, that it's perfectly normal stuff, that is perfectly fine, right? It wasn't something that was bad at all. But most of the time, if something is anomalous, if something is not behaving normal, then that means it warrants a closer look regardless, right? And then number three, our use of security tools and SIEM devices. So this is going to be a way of being able to go ahead and make sure that we're tightening security, right? So our security tools might be something as simple as a firewall, for example, and setting up proper firewall rules. Or we might be using something like a SIEM tool that'll go ahead and kind of aggregates all of our logs in a quick and easy to look place, right? So this might be something like Splunk or something similar. And then we might use something like Snort as another security tool to then be able to go ahead and set up alerts and stuff like that. They can be brought into those logs. So when something happens, we're alerted to it and we're able to see it in those SIEMs, right? So we point out to accomplish the duties above, those three different things we just mentioned, the SOC analyst might utilize a myriad amount of skills to mitigate incidents. We're going to say, let us use the following skills to talk through a mock scenario of what would happen when a user actually did go and click on the malicious link that was in that email we just took a look at, right? So we're going to see right here, first, we have to maybe implement and manage security tools, right? So basic security tools include, like we mentioned, firewalls, intrusion detection, prevention technology, threat and vulnerability management tools, data loss prevention tools, filtering technologies, traffic inspection solutions, reporting technology, and data analytics platforms. Now, on top of this tool set, as we kind of also pointed out, a SIEM solution can help aggregate all of these different events into one dashboard, into one place to look at them, right? To be able to kind of see and find everything in one location instead of having to go to many different spots. And so we can generate alerts for our analysts to investigate all through this type of software. We're going to see that we can then investigate suspicious activities and then contain and prevent them, right? So with the assistance of security monitoring tools, the SOC analyst can look into suspicious activity within the IT systems and networks. Typically, we'll do this by receiving and analyzing alerts that come from our SIEM, which may contain signs of compromise or related threat intelligence, right? The analyst will then perform what we call a triage on those alerts to be able to understand the extent of the threat and then be able to respond if necessary, and then escalate the incident to a higher tier analyst, right? So what's going to be happening? Well, maybe that person went ahead and clicked on that email, right? And they open it up, they see the link that they need to reset their password, they click on that link, right? So if we set up everything well, then hopefully our basic tools like our firewalls can be able to go ahead and catch that and stop that communication so nothing happens, right? But if it goes through, then hopefully we have some alerts set up. So that way, once it starts doing suspicious stuff, right? Once that person has clicked on that link, maybe it downloads some malicious software, or maybe it opens up a reverse shell to the malicious actor, and then they're starting to do weird things. Well, then hopefully our alerts will catch that and tell us, right, in our scene, in which case we would then triage that, right? Now, at that point, we would say that we have an event, so to speak, right? And then we would check to see, is this literally something that needs to be escalated? So is this a positive event, or is it a false positive, right? Something that looked weird, but once we went ahead and inspected it, it actually turned out to be okay. It wasn't something that was malicious after all, right? So that's why we say right here, we might have to then escalate the incidents, right? So as a SOC analyst, we just need to look at these alerts. We need to be able to look at what is anomalous and be able to investigate it, and then be able to make that call on, no, this is fine, it's okay, we don't have to worry about it, versus actually something just happened, this is bad, now somebody needs to deal with it, right? Now, typically as a SOC analyst, that's all we got to do, identify whether this is an actual positive event or is it a false positive, right? And then we can ignore it. And once it becomes that we actually have an event on our hands, one that we've been able to verify that it actually is some malicious actors or malicious software or something similar, then we pass it on to somebody else, right? And now they can be able to go through and start dealing with that and respond to that incident. So we say then the SOC personnel may not be able to entirely stop threats from entering the network, but they can stop them from spreading, right? So once we've identified that this event is now what we call an incident, right? So we have a positive event. We've been able to positively identify that, yeah, something bad is happening. Now we have an incident, right? And so we may not be able to stop that from happening. We may not be able to stop incidents from occurring, but once we know that this has happened, we may be able to set something in place to stop them from spreading, right? For example, if a network system is compromised, then the SOC analyst should be able to identify the infected hosts, so which machines on that network have been compromised, and then be able to prevent them from affecting the rest of the network. Maybe we'll take them off network access and isolate them or do something similar, right? That way they can't be able to start infecting other computers on the same subnet as that one that's already been compromised. And to do this, we point out that our analysts can use the controls that are on our switches, our routers, and virtual local area networks to be able to stop the threat from spreading, right? So we've already talked about these networks before, right? And how we can set up a VLAN, so that way physically they're on the same switch or router, but we can be able to kind of virtually separate them to be able to act and respond as if they were on their own network, right? Rather than being on the same one with the rest that are there physically. So once we realize that, hey, this system has been compromised and these are the devices that are infected, we can be able to go ahead and look at those things and be able to have those controls and then set those devices to be separate and isolated on their own virtual network, for example, right? That way, there's no access directly to any of these other devices. And now we can't laterally move and infect more. We also point out that analysts should be able to validate alerts and understand threat impacts on the network. Right. So again, as we're investigating these events to see, are they legitimate incidents, we should be able to find a way that, hey, if this alert is coming up, let me investigate it and be able to make that distinction, right? That yes, this is something we need to look into because this is now an incident, somebody malicious got in, or no, this is something that's, while it might be rare, maybe that doesn't happen too often, this is something that is normal. It is legitimate software working or something similar, right? And so therefore we don't have to worry about it, right? And then, of course, when we escalate it, well, we need to understand that threat impact. Is this something that they need to deal with immediately because that threat impact is going to be huge? Or is this something that like, hey, we kind of noticed this, that kind of leaves us vulnerable, deal with it as quickly as you can, but if it's not done within the next hour, it ain't going to kill anybody, right? That kind of thing. And then we see right here, the next thing we get into is we want to reduce latency and downtime of networks. So a lot of the times when we're working for a company, right, and we're trying to be able to do this cybersecurity stuff, the company itself is more concerned with, can we actually use our network or use our resources? Can we do business as normal without there being problems, right? So they want it to be that the network doesn't have to go down, right? That their website, for example, doesn't go down, that their servers are still available, they're responsive, right? If they have to do some networking to be able to go ahead and access something, maybe they're accessing information, and they're doing it off of the cloud, right? To be able to go ahead and do their job. Well, then that cloud access is available, right? Or if they're downloading a file that they need to work with, that it isn't going to take 3 to 4 hours, right? That they can be able to do it within minutes or less than a minute, depending on how big that file is, right? So we want to make sure that what we're doing as part of our job as cybersecurity analysts, right, or SOC analysts, is to make sure that this stuff is working properly with all of our security stuff in place, with all the additional stuff we're putting there to be able to tighten our defenses, that we are still making sure that latency is down and the networks are up as much as possible, right? So we point that out right here. Businesses need to ensure their networking systems are running with minimal or no downtime, right? If it goes down, that's going to cost the business money. And that's what they care about mainly, right? That's why we're barely seeing the surge in cybersecurity these years, right? Within the past few years, because previously businesses just cared, does my business work? Can my website work, right? Are these things functioning so that we could actually be able to perform business, right? They didn't necessarily care so much about security as long as there was functionality. And it's still the main thing, right? Even though they're putting a bigger emphasis now on cybersecurity to make sure that information is secure, nobody's going to hack their stuff, hopefully. It's still going to be primarily the businesses are concerned with, can I do business? Is my functionality there, right? So if possible, we're going to say that risks are mitigated before a security event reaches key business infrastructure, right? We want to be able to make sure that something that gets compromised isn't going to be critical infrastructure to continue to have the business run. Because a lot of the times, in order to clean it out, in order to sanitize it, right, we're going to see that we might have to turn it off or take it down or do something else, right? In which case, if that's critical business infrastructure that got compromised, then that's going to cause it to go down. And then that's going to cause the business money, right? So we want to be able to prevent that as much as possible. The next part, we say provide security services to the organization, right? So ideally, we should function as a shared service center, which is cross-function with operations to provide assistance to all aspects of a company, right? This is why a lot of the times in a small company, you might see that cybersecurity is actually working under or a part of IT, right? Because much like IT is trying to make sure that the digital systems are all up and running regardless of what's going on, right? And they're providing help to make sure that if anybody's having trouble with that they can be able to troubleshoot it and help the customer, so to speak, right? Within that company or organization. Same thing is kind of similarly happening here, right? While we're trying to focus on the security aspects, this is still going to be a kind of shared service, right? And so we might be able to have to work with, or on a larger company, work side by side with something like IT to provide assistance to all aspects of the company, right? And so we say that they aid and guide interactions with other IT departments, with HR, with legal operations, and so on and so forth, right? And then finally, we have our audit/compliance support. So part of our job as cybersecurity is we got to make sure that any sensitive information is being dealt with in a way that's going to be responsible, right? Particularly to regulations, to rules, laws, and so on, right? And so that's where this audit to make sure that everything is in compliance comes in, right? So SOC analysts are often responsible for auditing systems to make sure that we are meeting compliance requirements. For governance, we are ensuring that organizational activities support the organization's business goals. For risk management, that we can identify, classify, and address any risk that's associated with organizational activities. And then finally, compliance, ensuring that the organization meets all legal and regulatory requirements. Now, again, this is why we might have to work with HR or legal and so on and so forth, right? Those different departments within an organization to make sure that everything is up to snuff. Any questions so far on these different areas that we may have to deal with as a SOC analyst? All right. So now we get here to our cyber kill chain. So we point out this specific thought process, right? The cyber kill chain was developed by Lockheed Martin's computer incident response team, and it describes the progression that an attacker will follow when planning and executing an attack against the target. Now, we briefly saw this when we were doing our red team, right? But we need to be really aware of this when we're doing blue team, because if we start to notice these steps happening, then we're under attack, right? So we need to be aware of kind of like the enemy's playbook so we can recognize when it's happening and respond accordingly. So we see then the cyber kill chain is comprised of 7 different phases, right? And we went through a lot of these when we were going over red team. Phase 1, reconnaissance, right? This is where they're going to research, identify, and do a selection of targets, right? So they're going to go ahead and kind of like find out, well, where are they weak? Where can we possibly gain an entry point into their systems? Maybe if they have a location where Wi-Fi is available, and maybe I don't have to go into the building to gain access to that Wi-Fi, right? Things like that. So they're going to research, they're going to try and identify, they're going to figure out what can they attack, so what's going to be their target. And this often is represented as crawling internet websites such as conference proceedings, mail listings for email addresses, social relationships, or information on specific technologies, right? So we can do stuff like using the harvester, which can be able to go through and be able to find emails, right? Or just looking at social media like LinkedIn to be able to find out which people are identifying themselves as working at that company. So now we get some information, right? Maybe I could be able to go ahead and call up the company and be like, oh, you know what? Steve in accounting just didn't give me the papers again. Could you be able to send them my way? Here's my email, right? And then because maybe we found on LinkedIn that there is an actual Steve in accounting, they might know that person, then that gives kind of a validity to your claim that, hey, I need you to send this over, right? So that's part of reconnaissance. Phase 2, weaponization. So we see right here, we're coupling a remote access Trojan with an exploits into a deliverable payload. This is one example of what we might be doing for weaponization, right? So we have that we're getting some legitimate software in this case, in this example, and we're hiding an exploitable payload inside, right? This is going to typically be utilizing an automated tool, also known as a weaponizer. So this would be something like MSF Venom, right? To be able to go ahead and create something that we can then deliver to them. And once it's on their systems, if they run it, they've just given us the keys to the castle, so to speak, right? So we've weaponized that piece of software. Phase 3 is the delivery. It's how do we get them that payload? How do we send them that weapon, right? So we're going to be all about the transmission of that weapon to the targeted environments. And then finally, phase 4 is what actually causes it to run, right? So we call this exploitation. This will trigger the code that we had in our weapon. Most often, exploitation targets an application or an operating system vulnerability, but it could also just simply exploit the user themselves, right? As we saw with that phishing attack scenario, right? Maybe by just clicking the link, it'll download and run the virus or something similar, right? So the user themselves then is what's being exploited. Or we might leverage an operating system feature to auto execute that code, right? We kind of saw that with cross-site scripting that, hey, if we go to a certain website and certain script written on that website is provided, that's going to automatically activate and run it, right? So that's going to be an operating system feature or something similar where it just auto executes the code. Phase 5, installation. So here we have the installation of a remote access Trojan or backdoor on the victim's system to enable the adversary to maintain persistence inside the environment. So right here, that installation, that goes hand in hand with one of those last words, right? Persistence. Now that we have a foothold, we have some control over this device, how can we keep that control? We can't count on them opening up the same email and clicking on that link and downloading that same software to be able to give us control again and again and again, right? So what can we do to have that persistence, right? So in this case, we see that examples is giving is that it might give us a remote access Trojan that now will start up every time the computer starts up and give us access, right? Or maybe it's going to open up a back door that at any time we can be able to go ahead and run through and be able to gain control to their system, right? Or something similar. Phase 6 is our C2, or what's known as command and control, right? So here, we're gonna have some software that can beacon outbound to an internet controller. So something running on our server, right? For our code that we have distributed. And so then it's going to establish what's known as a command and control channel, where we're essentially going to be able to give it instructions on what to do next, right? So that software is beaconing out to us, is reaching out, it's kind of calling home. It reaches our server, and then our server tells it what to do next. So that we can continue to do something and we have control over that machine. Phase 7, actions and objectives. So here intruders will take action to achieve their original objectives. Typically this objective is data exfiltration. So we're trying to look for some sensitive information and then copy it over to our stuff. So now we have a copy of that sensitive data, right? So this can involve collecting, encrypting, or extracting information from the victim environment. So sometimes it's not even actually sending that data over, right? We point out right here, encrypting can happen. That's something like ransomware, which is on the rise within the past few years, right? So we don't even actually get access to the data ourselves. We just encrypt the data and prevent the users from accessing their own information, right? And then we let them know, hey, you can't access it, I don't care if I can access it, but if you pay me so much money, I'll tell you how you can gain access back, right? So we'll give them the encryption key so they can decrypt it and then be able to go ahead and be able to start using their data once again. So something like that can be what happens, right, when it comes to this action and objective. I point out violations of data integrity or availability are also potential objectives. Alternatively, the intruders may only desire access to the initial victim box for use as a hop point to compromise additional systems and move laterally inside the network. So we've seen this a lot of the times in big network hacks, right? For example, when Target was hacked, its systems directly were not compromised, right? They weren't able to go ahead because they have the money, they have the security in place to prevent their systems from getting hacked directly. What ended up happening is one of their suppliers, right, somebody that they were working with as a third party, their systems, because they were a smaller organization, were compromised. And then they were able to laterally move from one machine to the next until they were able to gain keys that allowed them access to Target's network. And it looked legitimate. It looked like a regular transaction from that third party supplier, right? And so that's how they're able to then gain access to Target and then be able to go ahead and start trashing it and getting the information that they wanted. So we see then at that point, the initial hack was just as a point to hop, right? Move laterally to another system to be able to compromise that additionally. It wasn't the goal was that supplier themselves, right? They weren't the end goal. It was to try and be able to reach Target through them. So that's going to be what we're going to see here in phase 7, right? So we kind of see that happening here in this little graphic. We have reconnaissance, always going to be the first thing. We need to learn about what is our target doing, what's happening, what kind of systems do they have in place, where are their weak points, what can we target, and then make a decision on how we're going to approach that, right? Once we do that, we have our weaponization. So then how are we going to go ahead and of those targets that we were deciding upon and the weaknesses we were able to find, how can we be able to take advantage of those weaknesses, right? Then how can we deliver that weapon that we created to them to then be able to exploit them, to then be able to go ahead and do installation, which is going to grant us that persistence. And then we might have command and control where we have some software left on their device that's going to be beaconing back to us where we can be able to issue more commands and stuff. And then finally, we get to our actions and objectives, which is going to be what are we doing to actually reach the objectives we initially had? Are we moving laterally to go somewhere else? Are we trying to gain sensitive data? Are we going to exfiltrate it to our own systems? Are we going to try and trash it? Are we going to encrypt it and do some ransomware? What's happening, right? So we're going to get right here to activity 1A, and this is going to be dealing with common attack vectors. So we see right here, an attack vector is defined as the method or way by which an adversary can breach or infiltrate an entire network or system. These attack vectors enable hackers to exploit system vulnerabilities, including the human element. Remember, we can make something that's digital as secure as possible, but there's always going to be the human elements, right? And your system is only as good as its weakest link. So if you haven't trained your people, or if they're not tech savvy, or if they're unaware, or even if you've trained them, but it's been years since you kind of reminded them of these things, then there's going to be a weak link there, right? There's always going to be that human element that can fail. So we point out here are some ways that a malicious actor might get into our systems, right? These are the different types of attack vectors we want to be familiar with. So the first is compromised credentials. So we can say, describe a case where the user credentials, such as username and passwords, might be exposed to unauthorized parties. This typically happens when unsuspecting users are compromised by something like a phishing attempt or entering their login credentials onto a fake website. And then privileged access credentials typically pose a higher risk than just your normal everyday account, right? The second part, phishing. We kind of saw that scenario earlier, right? Phishing is a technique for attempting to acquire sensitive data, such as bank account numbers, through fraudulent solicitation within an email or a website, in which the perpetrator masquerades as being a legitimate representative of that business or person, right? Spoofing. Spoofing happens when cyber criminals use deception to appear as another person or source of information. That person can then manipulate today's technology, such as email services and messages, or the underlying protocols that run the internet to make them appear that way, right? So like if you wanted to go to google.com and they redirect you to their website instead, right? They're spoofing Google in that case. So they're trying to appear like this legitimate thing, almost like that phishing email, but this isn't an email, right? This is in other types of communications, anything else that you're doing, where they're now trying to be able to go ahead and appear as that other entity or that source of information. Then we get ransomware. Ransomware is software that infects computer networks and mobile devices and then holds your data hostage until you send the attacker money, right? So they encrypt it, and then they have the encryption key so that way you can be able to break that encryption. And they pretty much tell you like, hey, if you want your information back, pay us, we'll tell you what it is, you can get it back, right? Otherwise, the only other option typically you have is wipe the drive, and if you don't have a proper backup, then you've lost all that data, right? Then there's also insider threat. This is the potential for an insider to use their authorized access or understanding of an organization to harm that organization, right? So imagine somebody, let's say in IT, becomes disgruntled and they have access to an administrator account. Well, then they can be able to go ahead and use that legitimate access as an administrator to do a lot of harm to the company if they wanted to, right? That would be an insider threat. So for our exercise, we're going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms in a few seconds, and we're going to have you work on the following. We're going to say, let us examine the effectiveness and practicality of modern age phishing attempts. So one, we're going to open the fish tank repository of user submitted phishing attempts. And I'll look to see in a moment where that is, because I don't think they linked it here. We're going to review the stats
link's
tab.
right there, Tony. But when they open the link, they need to right click on fish tank repository, or it's going to load inside of your LMS. So make sure you right click and open up into a new tab.
Thank you for that. All right, so hopefully you guys all heard that, right? So make sure that you guys are right clicking and opening it up in a brand new tab rather than just left clicking it on there, because otherwise it'll open up inside the LMS. You might have some issues with that. So you're going to open up that link, right click on it, open it up in a new tab, right? You're going to look at that repository of these user submitted phishing attempts. You're going to review the stats tab to observe the number of verified and suspected phishing attempts, and then observe how many phishing emails have been uploaded just from today if you were to go to the home tab, right? Then in your groups, so in your breakout rooms, right, with whoever's there with you, discuss the following. What do you notice about these attempts, right? So go look through these attempts, look through some of the ones that are there, look at some of the ones that have been submitted today, right? And what do you notice about them? What do they have in common? And then also we ask, are they usually more generic or are they targeted to a specific user? And then these phishing attacks constantly happen during the day. So is it also important to check, is it always important to check before you click? So when you're opening up your email and you're looking at the links that they provide or the information that they have, is it always important to be looking at and verifying, hey, where is this link taking me before you actually click on it, right? And then the second thing we're going to see right here is what other cyber safety tips can you remember or should be known, right, to keep us from being compromised? If we follow these tips, that we're going to be safer because of it. Any questions on this first activity? Let's see. Pam J says, we are looking into the forensics and incident response lab 2, correct? For this first exercise, we're going to see that there's this link right here, the fish tank repository. You're going to be right clicking on that. You're going to be opening it up, going to that website and looking at the user submitted phishing attempts there. And you're just going to be looking at that information on that website to be able to answer these questions here for this first activity. Excellent. All right. Any other excellent questions like that? All right. If there aren't any questions, let's go ahead and open up the breakout rooms and have fun inspecting these phishing attempts. All right, Joel, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, feel free to join into the breakout rooms and start looking at those phishing attempts.
Good. I was just going to ask for that. So if you could take a second and fill up that poll for us. Yeah, share my screen here. What am I going to do? It's this one. There we go. Sorry, I got like a a new monitor, so I got stuff everywhere now. I can actually see everything on one screen. Let me make this a little bit bigger so I can see it. Okay, so in this past exercise, we went over some of this fish tank repository. I believe, did I bring it up? No, I didn't. Open that in a new tab. And some of the stuff we were asking you to go through is review the stats tab. So let's go to the stats tab real quick. That's Nelson away. So our stats tab up here. And the next section said, observe how many phishing emails have been uploaded just from today in the home tab. So we're gonna go to, there's, where's the home tab? Okay, so this is ancient stuff. This wasn't today, was it? Pretty cool. There's got a nice little diagram right here you can go through. Daily phishing attempts on July 2nd versus August 1st. Okay, so this is archive. That's what I was looking at up there. So kind of like something happened around early July, end of July, and it started diving off. When you're doing like cyber threat hunting and you're doing a lot of like research, I was pulling up latest phishing news from like Bleeping Computer. You know, phishing attempts are everywhere, and that's like one of the biggest ways that you're going to have your credentials compromised, or they're going to try to gain the information from you. It's very effective. So think back on back when coronavirus was really big. There was a lot of phishing attempts that attacked the US because everyone was scared of it. Everyone wanted to try to find all the information. So at that point in time, phishing attempts for coronavirus were huge. But now let's look at other events that go on in the world. You've got stuff that has been going on over in Ukraine and Russia for a while. So you can say that, you know, anybody that has that as their concentration area, or it could mean something to them, a phishing email or a website that says, hey, click here, I've got information on what you were looking at. Phishing attacks can be very, very in-depth, and they can look very legitimate as well. It's kind of funny if you use this example up here. Yes, this one's the normal the trained eye. Let's say the trained eye will be able to pull out that information. Pull out there's a YouTube link. Pull out that this is a Gmail. Pull out that the logo is not right. Stuff like that. But to the untrained eye, this will go by the wayside, and somebody will accidentally click on it. Reviewing back onto the cyber kill chain, when you're looking up stuff as a SOC analyst or as a cyber threat hunter or any kind of security analyst, when you're noticing things triggering logs, when you're noticing things installing stuff, maybe open up shells on a computer, you're seeing extra processes run, go back to the cyber kill chain. Where and which step in that kill chain is this happening? If they're already installing applications, creating that reverse shell, you're all the way down here in phase 5 and phase 6. And I bring that up because as we go through the blue team, you're going to have a lot of examples that come up. You're going to have a lot of things that are happening. You're going to maybe looking at logs. You're going to maybe be looking at different applications or processes, and you're going to try to figure out where we actually are in that cyber kill chain. Does anybody want to? We just went over the attempts. It kind of went up and came back down, went back up again. So what other safety tips can help us from being compromised? What other things can we do? We say like training our eyes, looking at blatant misspelling, misformatting. You know, if it's a bank statement, like maybe the icons are moved or the header bar and is maybe not where it should be, right? If it's like Bank of America, it's usually in the top left because they Bank of, and then America could be on the other side. What else can we do? In the cyber field, I've talked to a few of you use secure Wi-Fi. That's one way you can do. You always want to have secure Wi-Fi because that's going to help you against somebody doing maybe some social engineering, social networking kind of thing of maybe being near you. They can try to get into your network that way. So that's one good thing. Yes, we always want to make sure we have a secure Wi-Fi. What else? I would say always being up on the news. Generally, I always verify anything independently outside the link. Yes, there's websites you can copy the links. You can always you're not going to sandbox stuff all the time. You're not going to open up an email in a separate area, but hovering over those links to see what they are. You can right click right here and you can maybe not open a link in a new tab. You may want to copy a link, right? We can copy a link and then we can open up like a notepad and we can paste the link in there and see what it says. Just in case when you roll over the top of it, it doesn't show up in the bottom or give you a preview of what that link is. So yes, that's a very good. Use multiple authentication, you know, MFA or 2FA. Yes. Those are really good for phishing because let's say you try to get into something. If it's a dud link or if it's a replicated link and it does not kick you back, let's say Microsoft, you have 2FA enabled, you click on that link and it's a dirty link and it goes to a spoofed Microsoft login page. You're logging into it, but it's not true because it's not going to kick you back the MFA link. Right there, you could say, you know what, I might have got my credentials compromised. You can easily go ahead and reset your password. But if they did get compromised, you have that extra layer of security. You have either a link coming to your phone that you have to click and hit accept. You have to open up a authenticator application on your phone or your tablet to type in a number or click OK. So using MFA or any kind of secondary authentication really, really helps against this. I was also going to say, if you're keeping up with typical research every morning, maybe not every morning, maybe like in the middle of the day, or at some point in the day that you are doing your open source research, looking at news articles. I showed a couple of you like Hacker News, Bleeping Computer. You're gonna have your own resources that you may engage in every day just to see what's going on in the world, trying to get your mindset in, okay, today this is going on. We're having, let's say, what was going on. You know, there's a new worm here, talks about, you know, Redis servers. A couple days ago, there's new faulty Trojans. Let's see, we had some VMware stuff that happened like a day or so ago. Just keeping yourself abreast of what's actually going on in the world will help you kind of be on the lookout for if there's a mass exodus of phishing emails coming out. You may see one similar email pop in your mailbox and you know right away, hey, I saw this on the news. I'm not going to click on that. I'm just going to throw it right in the trash can. Just kind of being aware of your surroundings. So you did a little research there. We're going to go into mitigation strategies. So this is the part of the last part of today, but how do you mitigate what just happened? So there's many different types of mitigation strategies that can be utilized for different cybersecurity attacks. Unfortunately, there are very few cookie cutter solutions, meaning one size doesn't fit all. You're going to have to figure out something that's going to work for your situation. Remember it because it may or may not work on the next time you have to do it. With technologies advancing daily, attackers become more and more tech savvy. So these phishing emails, back in the day, they were really, really ugly. There's a lot of misspellings. They're using stuff like ChatGPT and AI to create this stuff now, where it doesn't have so many spelling errors. It doesn't have so many issues. They can really make it feel very convincing, and you want to click on that link. It's vital to know a myriad of cyber mitigation strategies, as well as be versed in software and technology that is introduced to the general public. So just because you have it, you know, you're working as a cyber threat analyst, cybersecurity job, the bad guy has it as well, right? So keep that in mind. We've talked about this, like, what about Metasploit? That topic came up a couple weeks ago. Well, why doesn't somebody want to crack or break Metasploit? Well, they don't, because they use it and it's very effective. So that's just one example right there. So these are some of the ways we can help mitigate us being become victim to any of these attacks. So updating and upgrading software and hardware. It's vital for the mitigation as threat actors study patches and create exploits. So we've heard of Patch Tuesday, right? Windows does it once a month. There's a Patch Tuesday. It's usually like the second week of the month, and it will come out and tell you all the CVEs. So those common vulnerabilities and exploits. And as soon as that hits the market, then we know, and everybody in the world knows, what's vulnerable. Most companies and institutions and IT departments, you have until the end of the month to get those mitigations implemented. That could be updating software, that could be blocking software, that could be changing firewall rules or whatnot. The software your company may run on in these machines may be vulnerable to cyber attack on zero-day exploits. So not all the time you will hear about these zero-day exploits until they're actually exploited and out there in the wild. And then usually there's a patch, hopefully, that comes out following that announcement. Updates must be applied as soon as possible. That's on a case-by-case basis. Yes, we want to apply updates as soon as possible. On your home computers, on a closed environment, yes. As soon as there's a patch, go ahead and get it updated because you're less susceptible. Big companies, there's a little caveat there. They may not install those patches right away because they're still looking at the risk. They're saying that if there is a big risk there, some of those patches may break other things on the network. They may break other connections to servers, software, authentication machines within the network. So that's why we say as soon as possible, not right now. Attackers will attempt to utilize those zero-day and exploits against those vulnerabilities to continue to create the unauthorized access, which results in data leaks, thefts, or compromise. Additionally, removing unwanted or unneeded hardware and software out of the equation much as possible is very important. This helps you gain that control and maintain the control of your network. And it helps reduce those attack surfaces. So if there's an old legacy system that's on your network, fuel, oil, gas companies, energy companies, a lot of times you're going to see some Windows 7 boxes, you're going to see some Windows XP boxes, and you may cringe at that, but they should be at least secluded with no way for lateral movement off of that segregated domain. So updating and upgrading software and hardware, that's one mitigation strategy. Next one is defending privilege accounts. So This is also a core mitigation strategy. Not everyone needs administrative privileges to do their daily job. I gave you all this example a little while ago, where after your IT admin logs in the computer, or if you have IT admin privileges, you log into that computer. Those credentials are cached on a Windows computer. They're sitting there in LSAS, they're cached. So after you're done doing what you need to do, you need to reboot that computer, which clears your cache, clears your RAM on the computer, and restarts that session over, so that if somebody was on that system, gained access to it, they would not be able to copy those, exploit LSAS to gain those credentials. Just because you're IT administrator, you shouldn't be using your IT admin account for everything. Use your user account, your regular account, but then escalate to the admin account when you need it. How many of you at home have a Windows computer, have admin privileges, and run on your admin all the time? Sometimes it's like, oh, that's just easier. I can, when I install something, I just click OK. To help you defend your privileged accounts at home, you should have your admin account, but you should be running everything on a regular standard account. Use your normal account for every day. When you need to install something, use an admin account. If you practice what you preach, that's just what a lot of people should be doing. Is it right or wrong if you do it the other way? No, as long as you just cognizant on your system. Let's see. Hey, I'm gonna need to stop doing it. Yeah, we all do it. I do it too. It's just easier. Lately with Windows, when you try to install something, it usually pops up that little window that says, yes, you want to continue. But then it doesn't always happen that way. You could be installing something, you'd be running your computer. If somebody's actually in your system, they can do a reverse shell where you would not see it. It may show up on the attacker's PC and not your workstation. So there's a couple things that happen, and you've done these exact techniques over the last couple of weeks with privilege escalation and lateral between processes and applications. It's important to assign privileges based on risk exposure as required for operations maintenance, including privileged privilege access management, or PAM solutions, to automate credential management. So this means you may have different layers or levels of an admin. You may have a domain admin, you may have a local administrator. So local administrators may be able to install software. A domain admin may be able to change the networking configuration, add stuff to add those computers to the domain. And then you can have like a super admin that has access to everything. So there should be different levels of an administrator. Let's see what else. So yes, using one-time access tokens are really good, especially if they come to a device that you know will not get compromised. Let's say you're using one-time access tokens, but you're in a public environment and your phones may be always on your desk. They may not be as secure as if you've got you get a text, right? And it pops up on your screen, you can preview the text. If you're in an office space where everyone can see that, if somebody's trying to compromise your account, you may have ran to the restroom and they're like, oh, I'm gonna try to get into their account. And they know that text message is coming and they know you can visually see it. That's not as secure as you thought it would be. If you're in that kind of environment, you may not want to have those text previews on, or may want to do a different kind of multi-factor authentication where it actually makes you use an application, which would use like Face ID or like biometrics or whatnot. So you can see that passcode. Procedures should also be in place to securely reset those passwords and other credentials when they're compromised. So when somebody departs, right? If it's a shared admin, it should ever be a shared admin account, those passwords should be changed immediately upon like members termination. If you have employees that may be terminated that may have access, generally you want to, before they even know, kill their access. You know, let's say somebody's coming in Monday morning, you're another admin, their boss told you like, hey, we've got to terminate this account. All that stuff should be shut off. Maybe you can even automate it. If a hiring manager or whatever says this employee is now terminated, you can automate it via scripts just to terminate people's accounts. This is so that you won't have insider threat as well. But you need those procedures in place to reset those passwords. If there's a possible compromise, let's reset everyone's password to something different, maybe make it more complex, whatnot. And the last thing is MFA. We just talked about this. It's another layer of protection for those high value assets. Really, you should have MFA on everything if you can. It's kind of a pain in the butt, always having to like jump right on your phone, trying to get a password, but it will help you secure your accounts. There's other types of like tokenized MFA, like where you would have like a, I don't have one here with me, but it's like a keychain with some numbers on it. Sometimes you use those for secure computers, government computers, and you would just type in this little code, which is randomly generated to actually gain access to those workstations or accounts. Anybody have any questions on MFA? I think everyone in here should have a little bit of knowledge into it. I don't want to deal too much time on MFA because we've all used it one way or another, I'm pretty sure. All right, so this gets into a really fun part where we're going to create a phishing email. You just saw some phishing details here in the fish tank. If you want to kind of like look at some of the fish searches that went on, you can click on any of these. Some of them are really cool. Some of them are really detailed. Some of them look really legit. So what we want you to do is we want you to create that phishing email that would maybe link you to this. Our example email up here at the top, nobody would click on that link. Y'all pulled that one right out of the bucket, say, you know what, this doesn't look right. I'm not going to click on the link. So let's use with something, all this information you've gained so far in this class, let's create something really unique to make your campaign. So they want you to use Google Docs. Everyone should have access to Google Docs. You can share it with the group. Everyone can have access to it at the same time. So let's create a good campaign. Everyone in your groups, it could be anything in the world. I want you to really get creative with this. We'll give you like a full 45 minutes, and I want to share a couple of these with the class because I really like this kind of activity. So use several key tactics that you may need to trick somebody into to click on that link. You know, try to do these targeted attacks. Maybe it's I used the example, we used a targeted attack on individuals working at a fuel depot because everyone had big trucks. We made a phishing email to give away a free F-150 Lightning. We had a lot of clicks on it because a lot of people like trucks. They weren't even expecting it. So those targeted attacks really do work. Make sure there's instructions in the email, what they need to do. Use legitimate phrasing. So you may be able to use this fish tank to look up some of the wording, some of the phrasing to make it still feel legit. Google's your friend. I've always said this. Look out on the web, look at some news resources out there. There's plenty of them out there. I've given you a couple. Use those, and then we are going to share that back to the class. I think we're going to have them published somewhere. I need to figure out exactly where we want to publish them, but we'll have those uploaded. Maybe even right here into the chat room, but I'll give you some more guidance on that last one, but we're gonna break you back out into those rooms. Let's have some fun with that, and then we'll come back and do a quick reflection and go through this last little bit of information here. Any questions? Want everyone to be really creative with this, because this is where it really gets fun. You can get really silly with it. Yeah. See, I think breakout rooms are still good here. Yep. All right, we'll see you back in about 45. Share, because he's laughing too. Okay.
I think Robbie should share. We might need a minute. I'm gonna still tweak one
Okay,
thing.
okay. Robbie sharing first. There you go. You got put on the
No,
stool.
I think it was on I'll just pull it up. You're still working on it though, right, John?
You can pull it up. I just need like stall for a minute.
All right. So give me 1 second. I will share.
He's bringing that stuff up. How did you like this? Is this like when you actually get into it? This is the fun portion of it, especially when you are doing an assessment on a network. This is part of that scoping, right? You figure out what systems are going to be affected. You kind of figure out like how can we get in, and then we we jump on the how you can
So what we
target
did
that company.
is we created a fake OnlyFans. And we targeted the customers, not the content creators. And basically, yeah, we try to make it as real as possible. And these women actually don't exist. They're created through Stable Diffusion. So the entire page is fraudulent. And yeah, we try to mimic as much as possible, like what the payment structure looks like. This part right here, like what it would normally say. And yeah, our offer was what we thought of was, obviously like the first 100 new users get to sign up and have unlimited access to all the content on like a new version, like we're beta testing the new version, and get in now and you can have access and unlimited content. And
So
yeah,
who-
that way we'll be able to get credit card
who has the
information.
email that this was modeled after?
Say that one more time, Justin.
Who has a sample email that this one was modeled after to make sure it was legit? You don't have to answer that. It's fine.
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, it was Ryan. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so I mean, given how much money OnlyFans makes, I feel like it was a good strategy.
Everything does look fake on there. It does. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Who's
There you
next?
go.
Who wants to top that one? Anybody? Antonino, you got it?
Yeah. More PG than that. Let's see. I don't know what I just saw.
Spam.
What the hell? Okay. Not as exciting. So we have a email that went out to various departments from Human Resources. The subject is immediate implementation of revised company policies. Kind of get everybody's attention on holiday entitlement pay and sick pay. And we said here, dear team, we write to announce important amendments to our organizational policy governing holiday entitlement pay and sick pay is scheduled for implementation in the forthcoming week. These modifications will significantly impact all full-time, part-time benefit eligible temporary staff members across organizations. So that's our target.
we decided to target everybody at the company. Given the magnitude of these changes and their implications, it is crucial, there's anxiety, for all team members to acquaint themselves with the revised policy post haste. We place a high emphasis on the transparency and comprehension of our policies to ensure a harmonious working environment. So this is like, blowing smoke up your butt, but it sounds like it's from HR. Oh, this is serious stuff at this point. So these revisions have been undertaken with due consideration to improve the overall employee experience. So everybody wants their experience improved and bring us closer to our strategic organizational goals. There you go. That's a word for you in corporate. It is an effort to ensure a fair and equitable workplace conducive to professional growth and personal well-being. As always, we are committed to addressing your concerns and inquiries regarding these changes. We kindly request your cooperation and compliance with these updates as they are mandatory. There's your urgency, an integral part to our operational framework. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter. Your understanding and adaptability to these changes will significantly contribute to our collective success. Respectfully, Human Resource Department. We thought we would put most emails have their little signature at the bottom and a little point to view policy. You can click here or you can click here.
Very good.
I don't know the code behind here. I wish I did, but about as good as we got our
You
phishing
could
email.
probably right click the graphic and insert a hyperlink or something like that, but good, interesting. We've got urgency, we've got like straight up details, we've got like, you need to do this now. And then, but then you got the soft hand, like an HR process would be like, okay, well, this is what we need to do to review the new policy. Here's the updated one and whatnot. Good stuff.
Thanks. That's
Anyone else?
Joel and Brendan and Cam was on the group there.
We have one more that we want to do. Go ahead, Griffith.
Yeah, here, I'll share my screen. All right. Yeah, so we did one as a fake Coinbase email, since we had seen that there are a bunch of fake crypto phishing sites on that site that were listed. So we said, dear Coinbase users, we are currently upgrading our system to use two-factor authentication and requiring all users to provide a form of authentication. This is mandatory and access to your account will be deactivated if an authentication method is not provided within the next 24 hours. This is to ensure privacy and security for all of our users. As a token of our gratitude, you will receive $20 of Bitcoin added to your account on completion. Click here to access your account. Thank you for your cooperation, Coinbase security team.
Nice, like it.
Yeah, so like I guess the thing with these crypto wallets is like, compared to like a bank, you sort of have less recourse when something happens, right? Like you can't like call them up and be like, hey, this transaction wasn't supposed to go through. So I think it's probably more likely to actually like get something out of this and not have your efforts be reversed, I guess.
Yeah, this is good. This is one of those things where you're saying we need to implement this to remediate, possibly security threat or a flaw. By you completing this, you're going to keep your account open, and we'll give you some money for it. So that could work. Awesome, good stuff. So I'm gonna go back to the last portion of this. Where are we? Right here. All right, so reflecting back on what we've discussed tonight, what kind of trends are they believable? So we have 3 different trends here. We had some trends that were in fish tank. So was there any trends that anybody, we got some money stuff in here, money. I haven't looked at any of these in a little bit, so yeah, these are showing they're valid fish. Yeah. There's no screenshots. So trends is usually money. Trends is getting you to either secure your account and not have a lapse in account access. Do some of these things seem believable? We had 3 examples here that you all came up with. Would you fall for that one if it was sent to you? You know, you got to think, was it believable? You know, I know we had some fun with them, but were they believable? The Coinbase one, probably believable. The one from HR, probably believable. I got an OnlyFans email, probably not believable to your work email, but you know, it could be believable for some other people. Why do you think it works so well? Got to have that for you to actually interact with it. It has to mean something, has to be targeted to that group of individuals, that company, that person, for it to work so well. It has to be written clear and concise, has to be look almost legitimate, have the same markings, trademarks, copyright, icons, you know, badging to make it look legitimate. And it has to hit that trigger point on that person to actually want to click on that link. That's why they work so well. So going back to the original message, you can always look at your message ID. So that's going to like that URL for the email address. When we broke down our email from the top up here, we're showing you down here at the bottom, just some more information you could have captured and gathered if you were actually looking at this email in a live environment. You can see when it was created. You can see the from and to lines here. And then you can look into the background code of that email. And we can see the image that was here. We can see the embedded link, just like if you were to hover over it and see that, or right click and copy link and put that into a notepad. It's kind of a good practice to do, where you would take that link or the maybe copy and paste the whole email into a Word document so you can actually do some investigation on it. But we're showing you here some of the extra bit of information that was within the email that you'll look at when you're doing these type of assessments, when you're diving into a network or you're scanning for possible compromises. You may scan using applications like Splunk and other ones where you're going to go through and you're going to look at some emails and seeing if something looks like a phishing attempt. Why did it look like a phishing attempt? Where were those links going to? You can then legitimize whether that email was fake or a phishing fake as being just completely off the wall, phishing attempt trying to gain some information, or it actually being a legitimate email. Anything else we want to cover over the phishing email? Any questions? Anything else we want to discuss from earlier in the day over our SOC analyst duties? This is just high level overview right now. Cyber kill chain, you're going to see this a lot throughout the rest of the course. Should be more of like a review right now. So moving forward, tomorrow we will be going over introduction to logs. And then we have a competency checkpoint, on Wednesday. Introduction to logs and our competency checkpoint is what's on the docket for Wednesday. Additionally, we have our project that's due on Friday. So close of business midnight on Friday. Is anybody having any issues they want to bring up, discuss regarding the project? Not seeing any hands. Antonino, I see your hand.
How do you do challenge 2?
Challenge 2. I
Jumping
can.
in. Well, my question was, a couple people said they did command injection. I guess I was way wrong. I thought I was going to use Nessus or something. I'm just really lost.
So keep in mind when you're doing your scans, you can be able to, in addition to looking at what ports are open, looking what services are running on those ports, right? And if we look at those services, it should give us a name. So if you recall what option we can use with Nmap to be able to see what services are there, we can then also then Google the name of that service. And that should give us an idea of how we can go ahead and take a look, or how we can dig a little deeper into some of those ports that it's mentioning, right? And then once you dig a little deeper, you should be able to go ahead and find an interface that, like how some of the others were mentioning, you might be able to go ahead and do something like one of the web vulnerabilities we were discussing, right? So you might be able to find something like file inclusion or command injection and so on and so forth. And that'll give you a way into that first machine.
Yeah, there's no wrong way of using Nessus if you wanted to. If it's available, it's on your network and you want to run Nessus against it just to give you some more fidelity on the vulnerabilities, that's great. Using Google as your friend, pulling up, okay, this is an Apache server that's running on port 1013. I don't know what's on that port, I'm just making that up. But okay, there's an Apache server. Let's look at that Apache server, that version. Let's see some vulnerabilities on there. Let's see what the latest CVE is on that and see if it's ever been patched. And then that's how you start red teaming against those applications and devices, because you just start from the bottom up, just build your case against it. It's good to have like your notepad up or like your word pad up, just to, as you're going through there, you can copy and paste and put it in there and say, okay, well, I've got this service running on this port, this service running on this port, and do like little bullets under it. Even if you were to add the bullets and make links to stuff you've seen out on the web, so it's easier than having like a ton of stuff on your monitor. You're like, okay, this is cool. I'm gonna come back to that one, put that link in there, go to the next thing, and kind of like build your case upon it. Because if you need to step away and come back to it, at least you have everything there. Make the screenshots of everything. We said that the IP addresses shouldn't change. They may change. On a normal assessment, no, you're not going to scan a network and IPs change. In this simulated environment, it's possible if you were to step away and come back the next day, IP addresses may change. But if you write down all your steps you went to get there, it's gonna be like that to get right back on track. I hope that helps.
No, it's a operator error, obviously. I was thinking too logically. I was staying in a box and not going outside the box, but it's just a lack of knowledge.
There's no ends to the box. The box has rounded edges. You can get out. And keep in mind, like even for me doing this for a little bit of time, I still go back to my notes. I still go back to my run book and my playbooks to figure out what the step is. Yes, in the top of my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna run this scan. I'm like, hold on, let me look up and make sure I'm running the right scan. It's not a race. Take your time with it. Make sure you're getting the right command done. Just so that you're not accidentally making too much noise on the network too. Because as you're trying to investigate that network, you also want an adversary, if they're on the network, not to see you investigating that network. John, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I kind of on the topic, I wanted to ask you and Tony if you guys had any like note-taking strategies or anything for when you're doing something like this, because I was realizing I was doing like dozens and dozens of commands and trying different things, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. And then so trying to, do you just write everything down absolutely that you do, or do you just
So
wait
if
till?
you like, have you ever played in like GitHub, GitLab using like Markdown?
No.
It's just a way
I'm-
of formatting stuff. It's not easy off the get-go, but it sometimes can get easier. You can use applications like Notepad++. You can use other Markdown applications like Sublime Text. They're all free applications, but you can kind of write your notes as like it's code. And you can make it really pretty so that you can come back to it and add stuff to it later. So that's just one suggestion. You can copy and paste it and throw it into a PowerPoint slide. So, challenge 1, here's all my stuff. Challenge 2, here's all my stuff.
As far as the
Everyone-
information that you might be taking down, I would say any commands, anything that you're typing into the command line, or like if you were doing like how someone mentioned the injection, right, for that code injection. If you're gonna be doing something like that, write that down in your notes, right? What was it that I typed in as the command to get this thing to happen or to go to the next step? And then any piece of information that jumps out at you, right? So let's say you go ahead and do your next scans. What IP address was it? It comes back with the 1013 port, right? What IP address comes back with 2222, right? Which are the two Windows machines, right? Things like that. So any information that jumps out at you, and then any commands that you're having to type in, those would be things that you should be typing down in your notes.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I will
No?
point out,
Okay.
if your machines are having trouble communicating, if you're not able to ping them, right? Or if one is able to ping the other, but not vice versa. Or I think in the chat, there was someone saying that they at one point they did a scan and they got hundreds of IP addresses coming back as being up. You really should be only getting back 5 machines when you do your scan, right? There should be your Kali machine, the 2 Ubuntu machines, and then the 2 Windows machines. So there should be a total of 5 machines coming back. If you're getting more than that, I would suggest shutting down your VMs, right? Turning the lab off, turning it back on, and then running your scans again to see if you're getting back only the 5, right? And if they're having trouble communicating, if they're not able to ping, same thing. Shut them down, turn them back on until they're able to communicate again. That's just going to be a technical issue dealing with the fact that we have virtual machines running through Vocarium. So shutting them down, it might take a while, right? Because it's going to take a while to shut down everything and then for everything to be recognized as being completely off and then starting it back up. But that's going to be the best way to be able to go ahead and make sure that, hey, we're dealing with just the machines that we are supposed to be dealing with, and we're having them that they can communicate. So if you're having any of those issues, try that resetting of just shut it off, turn it back on, right?
Excellent. Well, we've come to the end of the session for tonight. I want to thank everyone for being here. Tony and I will hang around for a little bit longer. If you guys have any questions, you want to run anything by us, and we will see you on Wednesday for logs. Fun.
Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, for those of you that are still here, if you have questions, feel free to type it in the chat or to unmute your mic. Otherwise, if you don't have any questions, have a wonderful night. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Tony and Justin. Thank you all for your participation. I've posted the survey link in the chat box, and Tony, I've posted it in the Slack channel too. I hope everyone have given their feedback and rated the session. If not, make sure you do it. And see you all on Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I have a question actually.
Go ahead.
It's about the OnlyFans idea. So Justin, you brought up that it probably wouldn't make a realistic email or like a direct message, right? It's not really believable. But I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about the idea of it as a watering hole attack and how would that work. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, So if someone's not utilizing like Tor, for instance, or a VPN or shielding their IP in any way, that does mean that anyone who touches the website is technically revealing their IP. So if you're a malicious actor running a scan actively, right? I mean, OnlyFans gets millions of people looking for it, right? So if you were just get like a fraction of that, you'd be essentially collecting IPs, right? I mean, would that be enough to essentially establish a connection?
You're getting public IPs, you're not getting, so, well, one thing to think about is your public IP, right? Your computer's going through a firewall or a router, some kind of gateway. Okay, so your computer has a local IP address. Then your public IP address is your router, your gateway to get out to the internet. So if you are trying to get a backdoor in, I can give you my public IP. You can't get into my network because I don't have any ports open for you to access. Unless that's where we go to port forwarding, where maybe you have a service running on a network attached storage device like a NAS, Apache server, and that port forwarding is going to, let's say it's port 555. That port is then forwarded to the beginning of your gateway. So when you come into your public IP address at that port, it then redirects you to that device. So yes, you can get somebody's public IP address, and yes, you can do a scan against it. You can see what applications are running on it. I mean, so it's the start of your red team. You're not wrong there. But if you do that like honeypot kind of attack where you're seeing how many people go to it, it could work, it couldn't work. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways you can make it work. I don't know how to.
Just to kind of give you a visual of what Justin is talking about. So here we are connected to the internet, right? Here's our router, and our public IP, which is what everybody would be seeing when we connect to them, is technically on this side of the interface. It's on this side of our router. So when you're connecting to that IP, you're technically connecting to our router from this end. You're not really connecting to our computers, which are these devices that are on our internal network on the other side of the router.
Okay. Yeah, I get that. So you would have to get the private IP in order to run any type of exploit, basically.
Right. We would need to know the public to
through
get
the
to the right
public
router,
IP.
and then get through that router to get to that private one.
Okay. Is that realistic for an attack of that size? Doesn't seem
It's
like
possible, but you'd have to get through the router, and how tight is that router, right? What firewalls may they be running, or what stuff do they have up that are you actually going to be getting through it?
And that's why we were
That makes
telling you, like, knowing those vulnerabilities, like if there's a camera system and it's public facing, and when you install that camera system, it opens a hole up, start making Swiss cheese in your firewall there. You get into that one, you're like, oh, there's a public facing camera, XYZ camera, and you can say, oh, it's only on uses port 80. You able to log into that camera, you might be able to get to the admin prompt, and at that point you can then spawn a shell off of it, and you can create. That's how you start jumping through the network. So from one camera, and yes, you can easily just from a public IP address get into somebody's network if they have something public facing that's very vulnerable. And that's kind of where we are going with this. We show you the red team stuff, how you get into it. You did some digging. Now, how do we block this stuff? That's the blue team. Like, how do we make sure that we put our defenses up that you can't get in?
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, like one of the main issues for a malicious actor to run this type of attack, one, you'd have to get through the router. And two, the nature of the attack means you'd be collecting potentially thousands of different public IPs, which means you'd have to get through thousands of routers. Right.
That's where
with potentially
scripting comes
different
in.
firewall
You start
rules.
running it against the script. So
Right. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. I think I have a better understanding of the holes in this. Thanks, guys. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah,
Awesome. You're welcome.
excellent question.
Cool. Thanks.
You're on the right track.
But you guys can admit that it's a great idea though, right?
Absolutely. It's very,
It can work.
again, if it's targeted to somebody that uses that site, yes, it would probably oh, click. But it just depends on your audience.
Yeah, the only reason I think the group we all thought it was somewhat of a good idea was just the amount of traffic that platform generates. So it just made sense. I don't know, like if there's any sort of sensitive information, whether it's we can fool probabilistically a small percentage if 2% pay for a fake, OnlyFans account, which is something I've been reading about that's been like happening a lot, especially with Stable Diffusion. People are creating fake content accounts and selling basically fraudulent products and services just to gain financial data, right? So I don't know, it was an interesting idea. It was a fun exercise, honestly. I actually liked it.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were starting to use AI generated images and selling that on OnlyFans. That would be something.
I think it's heading there. I mean, like I keep reading about the dangers of like AI computer generated images, like deep faking FaceTime, or the issue of like, if you're trying to watch a political correspondence, now we need to add verification to, are you actually listening to the president speak?
Or is it
Like,
faked?
Or is it faked? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. What do you, can I poke the barrel a little bit? Do you guys think that like companies actually have security controls in place to manage this type of threat? Or is it still kind of like unknown waters?
In my opinion, I think it's too new and they don't have it set up. I mean, just look back at our record with normal stuff, like just let's say with Amazon, trying to be able to do business over the internet, right? When it first came out, it was more about, hey, can we make this functional? Can we be able to actually sell our products online and make money off of it? There wasn't really a whole lot of security concerns. Then once they started getting hacked within the past few years, then something's like, okay, now we need to start beefing up our security, even though everybody had been telling them since the beginning, hey, you need to make your stuff more secure. So I think we're going to see that history is going to repeat itself, so to speak, with all of these things, right? Are there security measures in place? Probably nowhere near the level that they should be.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, definitely food for thought there. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
No worries. Have a good night.
See you as well. See you Wednesday.
See you then. All right, Abel, if you're still there, if you have any questions, feel free to be able to go ahead and ask or type it in the chat. Otherwise, have a wonderful night. All right, excellent. Justin, I sent you over the document that we discussed, so you should be able to have that there.
Looks good. I'll